It's time to dive deep into the cosmic currents with renowned astrologer Pam Gregory, who unlocks the transformative power of astrology in our everyday lives. Explore how celestial events from solar eclipses to the dynamic Jupiter and Uranus conjunction not only reflect universal energies, but also directly influence our personal journeys. Pam offers a window into how these powerful alignments can catalyze profound changes, inviting us to embrace growth and new possibilities. Join us as we delve into the ancient wisdom encoded in the stars, revealing insights into our individual destinies and collective evolution. Through Pam's guidance, learn how to navigate life's challenges with grace, understand the significance of your birth chart, and awaken to higher truths. This is your invitation to ride the wave of cosmic transformation, empowering you to live authentically and in harmony with the universe. So, good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on what side of the world you are sitting on at this very moment. We have the most amazing guest, a guest that I'm super excited about, a guest I've been waiting for such a long time to get on the show. The most amazing woman, Pam Gregory. Welcome to the show.
It's an absolute joy to be with you, Catherine. I've been following your work, and I love the different way you approach subjects and the way you interview people. So, yeah, it's an honor to be with you today.
Thank you. And it's honor to be with you today. And the way that we love to start the show, we always love to ask our special guest, how did you get into what you do today? What inspired you to get into astrology, Pam?
Yes, after university, I'd always, from the age of about 10, wanted to emigrate to Canada. So after university, the very next day, I got on a plane to Toronto, Canada, with $100. Didn't know anyone, didn't have a job, nothing. So started a new adventure there and lived there for 5 years. But the very first week, I joined a yoga class, and there was this big guy from Jamaica in the class. And a couple of the girls at the end said, he's an astrologer. So I went to see him and said, look, I know nothing about this, but I'd love you to do my chart. And bizarrely, his name was Aster, which is quite like Astra Latin for star, which is kind of bizarre because he disappeared soon afterwards. He was like an earth angel that was just there to kind of reconnect me. But anyway, I went round to his very small apartment a week later, spent 7 hours with him. And it's like the world had just cracked open to reveal this dimension of meaning that I'd never been aware of up to that point. And he went back in my life and gave me specific dates about events, and it was just like clockwork. It was just spot on. And through a variety of house moves, I lost the tape. It was a cassette tape in those days. And after 5 years, I decided to leave Canada, and I was packing up boxes, and I came across the tape of our recording. So I was playing it as I was packing boxes. And in this, he was actually saying September the 4th, 1979 will be a huge turning point in your life. That day was September the 4th, 1979, and I was leaving Canada forever. And he said, within 2 months, you'll be on one of the major highs of your life. And I was sitting at 19,000 feet in the Himalayas. So from that point, I was completely electrified and haven't stopped learning since.
That is amazing. That is amazing because I mean, I've had quite a few astrology readings and they haven't been that profound, I have to say, Pam. So that's pretty amazing.
Yes, and it's very important. Well, I no longer do client work because I'm so busy doing, helping the collective, but it's very important to pinpoint the birth time. So I will usually dowse it to get a birth time. If people don't know, they have to know, fairly closely. I can't just have a sort of 24-hour span, or the maths kind of just become too crazy. But once I've got that dowsed birth time, I will go back in the person's life, this life, and identify specific dates which have a black and white yes or no answer. Not, well, did your father die that month? And you can't say, well, he kind of died. He either did or he didn't. It's black and white answers. Did you have your first child then? Did you change country then? Did you? And if I get the answer to those is yes, all of those things happened, but they happened 6 months later, then I know that person is born, say, 4 minutes later.
Gotcha.
than I'd estimated. So I can actually pinpoint it in that way. So it's very important that I do that. It's also very validating for the client because if it works backwards, it's very likely to work forwards in time once we've got the correct time.
Yeah, because I know quite a few astrologers, and it's amazing how they just when they read their charts, they it's like this predictive tool that they're using, and they instead of dancing with the archetypes, they're actually waiting for something to happen. And I just find that really interesting because for me, and I could be wrong. I mean, I'm not an astrologist, but I have been dabbling in astrology for quite some time. That for me, it's like the weather forecast. It's what's around, and it's what we do with these archetypes. And
100%.
and whether they get and I'd love to hear more about whether they get activated, and if they're not activated, I'm sure they get activated, but it's like if I look, for Pluto, for example, there's a light and the shadow of each archetype. And so
Yeah.
I feel that if we don't dance with those archetypes, they sit in the shadow, and then we'll get the shadow aspects of it, like for Pluto, with destruction and power struggle, compared to if we in the light with the and dance with it, we're probably more into the transformation and the healing and that kind of energy. So I'd love to hear more about how do we navigate through this cosmic dance?
Yeah, yeah, really, really good question because I sort of want to give two answers to that. Firstly, if we understand the archetypes, and that's what my work is about all the time, helping people to do that. Every archetype, as you say, every planet will have a shadow expression and a positive expression. So my work is to help people understand that, so they know what they're dealing with. They've got an in-depth weather forecast, as you say. Having done that, and I can give some examples in a moment, but having done that, what I'm trying to do now is because there's such a sense of fatedness with astrology, even now, what are the planets doing to me? People want to come for a reading, what are they doing to me? And I want to go way beyond that to say, look, this is modeling clay for you. And once you understand the archetypes, we can really use them much more productively, but even go beyond them to say, okay, what kind of a reality do I want to create? And how can I use my birth chart to enable that? Finding the right moment strategically, going for the opportunities. So you start to live much more strategically. But just to answer your question more fully, I mean, if we take a planet like Uranus, Uranus can have a very savage kind of cutting off side. It can be, you can really feel abandoned with it. And this can start in childhood that either mother or father weren't emotionally available to you. So a script is set up in the neural network, if you like, of I am abandoned, I am regularly abandoned, there's no emotional support. And I remember a lady coming to me, and with every big Uranus transit she'd had, she either got fired, or the partner left her, or the husband left her, or, there was this savage emotional cutting off. But when I helped her understand, firstly, how that had developed from childhood, but secondly, that each of those occurrences, events, were actually her subconscious need for freedom, but she was making it happen in a very uncomfortable way. She was being freed by being fired from her job or let go in the relationship. That really turned her whole life around. Just that simple explanation started to turn her whole life around because she started to track her Uranus transits coming up. She was going to have quite a few, and just stepped into this completely new life of independence and freedom and emigrated. And, it was very different. So it can be enormously empowering. And I like to use astrology. I, you know, it, I don't like to be too predictive because I think astrology is only half the picture. The other half is our free will. And so I really want to empower people with it rather than saying X, Y, Z is going to happen and we're all doomed. There's no hope, we're all doomed. I mean, that is not a great use of astrology because the last thing I want to do is put people into fear, particularly at the moment. I want people to take the prevailing astrology of the time, the prevailing archetypal patterns, and say, okay, how can I live the best possible life? How can I make this earth and all the people on it have the best possible experience, and be really standing proud in how fully I've used the astrology to its best. Am I making sense there, Catherine?
I 100%, I 100%, and I'm right there with you because I believe that whatever is available to us, it's the meaning that we give it. So for me, I know that when Pluto did the whole transit in Aquarius, people were like, oh my God, there's going to be all this change and all the breakdown of all these systems, and I looked at that as like, wow, this is great. We're stepping into change. But everyone, there was fear. So I really believe that a lot of it is the how we interpret or our perception of what's taking place also plays a part on how we then experience what's taking place.
100%. I'm so with you on that, Catherine. And it's something I've been talking about a lot recently about what is your filter? What is your lens? Because if your filter is always, life treats me badly, I'm a loser, things never work out for me, that will be your reality. If your filter, if your belief system is, these are amazing times of change, and I'm just going to ride these waves to the best place I've ever been in my life and take the collective with me, then that's a very different filter, and that is more likely to manifest because that's your belief system. So that's something I've really been hammering home recently because, as I say, I really have got to the place where I think astrology is just half the picture. It's what we do with it then, and don't go into fear. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, it's easier said than done too, right? I mean, I don't watch the news. I haven't watched the news forever, purely because I'm too sensitive. Well, Pisces Sun, Scorpion Moon, Scorpion Ascendant, very sensitive. So for me, I just stay away from that kind of information. Um, but one thing I did want to say, as we are speaking, the before we got on the show, we were talking about our body, what we're experiencing. And I know there's been an increase in solar flares, CMEs, Schumann resonance. So obviously, we it's doing something to our body. I can feel it. It's doing something to our DNA. It's doing something to our consciousness. And this
Yeah.
is the part where, as we're speaking about how do we dance with these archetypes, how do we navigate through this storm of these changes that are taking place? Because I feel like I'm having a lot of out of body experiences.
Yeah, and this will accelerate. The psychic sensitivity for people will accelerate massively because we really are changing form, if you like, from carbon to crystalline. And this is over a very short period. I mean, apparently on other planets, this kind of ascension took hundreds of years. For us, it's really taking from about 2012 to about 2032, but we're already ahead of schedule with that. We're actually doing very well on this evolutionary pathway, but it's very concentrated. It's very fast. In this lifetime, there's no rehearsal for it. So what is happening is a whole confluence of situations, really. About every 12,000 years, our solar system goes through an area in space called the photon belt, the galactic ripple sheet and the photon belt, and there's much more concentrated high frequency light in that photon belt. So that's what the Earth is moving through right now. So many people can see this sparkly diamond light that we haven't seen before. This is relatively new for us. At the same time, because the Earth's and the Sun's magnetic shield have both dropped quite significantly. And if you think of those like cotton wool buffers that we've had two layers of cotton wool buffers between us and, the cosmos. Because they've reduced significantly, the Earth is now much more open to these balls of radiation that the sun is throwing out. And so these are actually, although they're uncomfortable, and those are the things that make you feel dizzy and hard to sleep and all the other, or extreme fatigue or tinnitus or, all aches and pains, all the other symptoms, they are actually ingredients for our evolution, because what they're enabling us to do is to hold more light in our bodies, to become the light body. And so both of these ingredients, if you like, are activating our DNA to remember all the other strands that have been dormant, and apparently our 24th chromosome, which Greg Braden talks about as well. 24th chromosome, which links us in to our multidimensionality, our expanded awareness, our links to all the star families, really, that are our heritage. That's what's happening right now. But all of these physical changes are happening as a result of the spiritual evolution. And so, although our instinct as human beings is kind of, eek, what's happening to me? I think the more we welcome them in as an ingredients for our evolution, the easier the ride will be. If we resist, I think as with anything in life, it gets more difficult. So I always say to people, we're welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love, because that's really where we're headed with all of this. So I struggle with sleep as well, believe me. So, but if we welcome them in, seeing them as ingredients for a fast track evolution, if that's our filter, we will have an easier ride because it's happening. We'll either have a rough ride or an easy ride. It's up to us which we choose, really, because of our filter.
So it's happening to all of us, right? It's not just
Yeah.
it's not the people, because you hear some people like, oh, well, I'm more into spiritualism and I'm awake, so I'm going to be, down that track. I'm going to be the enlightened one and move down that path. And then those that aren't will be going down this. So I still hear of separation, and I just don't see it that way. I see it as we're one, and consciously we're all going through this. How we're responding or reacting dependent on a baggage, I guess. The baggage, because I wonder, like, when light, if I think about light, when light comes through, if we've got a lot of baggage, and I'm just talking from healing because I used to do a lot of Reiki, Seiki, all of that when I was a lot younger. It takes a lot longer to work through. So I feel that probably shakes people up a lot more than those that probably have done a lot more of that healing or energy work or working with a vibrational frequency. I think the light would be a lot easier on them. Do you think that?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I mean, we are one consciousness. I absolutely believe that we are one consciousness. But people who still need to work through some of the baggage, and that's no judgment. We've each got a different karma. We've each got a different soul contract. We're each in a different place, really, on our individual journeys. But if they still need to do more work, the analogy I like to use is being at an airport. Some people are on fast track now, and some people are on slower track, but we're all going to get on the same plane. We are all going to get on the same plane. So unity consciousness, absolutely no doubt. But they are diverse expressions of that unity consciousness, depending on where you are at in your spiritual evolution. And again, no judgment on that. So I think if you've done a lot of spiritual work, you've worked through a lot of your baggage, I do think you will be, to a large extent, bubble wrapped. I do think you'll have an easier, smoother ride. It's almost like, sticking to the kind of airport analogy. We've all taken off in a plane on a windy day. And at lower altitudes, it's really bumpy as you're taking off, very eek. But as you break the cloud level, you start to have a smoother ride very, very quickly. So you could be over pretty much the same geography, but you're at a different altitude. So if you substitute altitude for frequency, if we've been able to raise our frequency enough, we're going to get a smoother ride through this, but we're all heading essentially for the same destination. And we are one consciousness, yes.
I love that analogy. That's just because I'm a visual person. I love that and that analogy. So how do we raise our vibrational frequency? How do we, so that we can tap into that, that smoother ride that you speak about, rather than going through the bumpy ride?
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a whole video on this recently for a sort of live workshop. And I think there are lots of, I'm a very simple being. I call myself a certified bumpkin. I'm a very simple being. So I found lots and lots of simple ways in my life to do that. Be in nature, bare feet on the grass. Just listen to the birds and just try and be blank at times. Get out of the mind and into the heart. And that very simple technique of it's the heart math technique, and it's a yogic technique. If you just imagine that you're breathing in and out through the heart, Just imagine that you're doing that. It can slow and deepen your breathing. You can go even deeper, particularly if you're struggling to sleep. You can do the yogic baby belly breath, where you breathe like a baby, let the breath breathe you. So you just drop into your belly, focus 100% on the breath, let the breath breathe you, and gradually, you will slow the breath, deepen the breath, and in moments, you're reducing your cortisol level, you're boosting your immunity, you're changing a whole series of biomarkers in the body, which is measurable if you did a blood test, just by changing your breath. I would deliberately take time out through the day to do that, and whether you just literally have a default method of, for you, what is it? Is it closing your eyes and dropping into your breath? Is it hugging a tree? Is it listening to bird song? Is it hugging your child and laughing and playing? Have a series of markers through your day so it isn't just a tunnel of stress. And I would milk these things as well, milk it. If you hit a good moment, like when I'm out in nature and the spring leaves are starting to come out now. I know you're at the other end in Australia, but the spring leaves are coming out, and there's a kind of electrical life force in nature, and you think, wow, just look at those trees and look at the green. I drive my friends crazy. Look at the green, look at the green. Isn't it beautiful? Look at these flowers, the primroses. Isn't it beautiful? So I egg it up, I milk it to really see the glass continually much more half full than half empty. And if some stressful, because people send me stuff all day long, and I'm sure they do to you as well, Catherine, if something stressy comes my way, you've got to watch this video. If I feel my frequency drop, I will just switch it off immediately. And I let my state of being be the most important thing that I focus on through my day. What's my state of being? I say to people, put post-it notes all around your house. What's your frequency? What's your state of being? And you can find simple ways just to flick it. Think of a loved one, listen to the birds, laugh with a friend. It's simple, simple, simple. Whatever it is, find simple ways of just flicking your state of being to get out of it. And that then changes your natural default state, and you start to naturally raise your default state. So you've got a different set point because you've become a master of your thoughts and your emotions in a much bigger way than you were before. We're moving into an age, particularly Pluto in Aquarius, where it is very important that we become masters of our frequency. We're stepping into masterhood. That's one of the best expressions of Pluto in Aquarius. If you think of those two jaggedy lines of Aquarius, that's frequency. We are electromagnetic beings. And so we have to learn ourselves to shift our frequency, our state of being as an electromagnetic state that can actually be measured through a magnetoencephalograph. You can measure that. And so, but I also think there's a spiritual responsibility that we have. If we're interacting with other people to any degree, we have a spiritual responsibility, I think, that we always have to leave people better than we found them. I make that a real rule in life. And if we all did that, that cheesy expression of be a smile millionaire was cheesy, but I think it works because it kind of ripples out.
It
So there are
does.
lots, all of these are, then it's not a ritual, it's not a ceremony, there's nothing complicated, simple, simple, simple ways through your day of just kind of catching yourself. Well, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to come back to something that will lift my frequency. Does
Mm,
that simple?
absolutely. Absolutely. I always think, is it Jim Rohn? You're the average of the 5 people that you hang out with.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm conscious of that, and I think that I've become very, I've got the picture of the hermit card in my mind right now, because I have become very much of a hermit, because everyone is very different, and I'm not judging at all, because I am practicing, Pam, which has taken me a long time, non-resistance, non-judgment, and non-attachment.
Yeah.
And it's very hard practice, a very hard practice, because we've been conditioned to judge, attach, resist. And
Yeah.
so as a practice has been really, really hard for me. But I really want to maybe explore a little bit about the dwarf planets because I know you speak about the dwarf planets quite a fair bit. And I love to see how this is influencing us personally, but collectively, as a collective consciousness.
Yeah, beautiful. It's so interesting to me, Catherine, that these dwarf planets, the ones we've discovered so far, were discovered, a lot of them by a wonderful astronomer called Mike Brown, who lives in Arizona, I believe, or around that area. And luckily, he's very well versed in mythology. So it's the discoverer, astronomer, who gives these dwarf planets their name. And luckily, he just through synchronicity, or he's named the planets and found archetypes that very much resonate with the way those dwarf planets operate, which is wonderful. He's given us a real gift with many of them. So, but a lot of them were discovered about 20 years ago. Now, they have been out in space for millions of years, undoubtedly, but our consciousness hasn't been able to access them until recently. So yes, you can say we've got stronger telescopes, but it isn't just that. Our consciousness was not ready to integrate them. So they are now becoming a higher octave of consciousness, I think, in the astrology. And that's why they fascinate me, because what I call our regular bread and butter planets that I've always worked with, they are more expressions of our psychology or our personality in a way. These dwarf planets are operating more on a collective consciousness level. Almost think of indigenous people who identify with their tribe as their extended family. You know, they don't just introduce themselves as a single person, they introduce themselves as part of that collective, that tribe. And I think that part of the magic of the dwarf planets is they're helping us to do this, helping this sense of altruism, community, the unity of humanity pulling together. um, all of them are very connected to nature in a very ancient way, you know, natural understanding of shamanism or earth's rhythms. And many of them are creator gods from indigenous myths, like Altjira, very linked to the song lines in Australia. Um, Tehero and Hayawako, creator farmer god. Kwawa, very linked to the creator myths around the Los Angeles basin, the Tongva people, the original residents there. One I particularly love is a dwarf planet called Haumea. And she's very relevant at the moment. And she is linked to the Hawaiian goddess of fertility. And she has three different aspects to her archetype. One is that she was able to birth babies from all over her body, not just the normal places. And she could regenerate herself from an old crone to a young maiden, which, you know, we can all look forward to. So she has an incredibly creative, regenerative capacity. And she could summon wild food from the land, even if it was laid waste by poor agricultural practices. She had a magic stick called the Makalai. So there's that aspect of her archetype. Another aspect is in her fire goddess side. She was said to birth the 8 islands of Hawaii, the volcanoes that erupted and became Hawaii. And in a final aspect of her archetype, um, on the island where she lived in Hawaii, her partner had taken some wild bananas from the land, and the autocratic leader at the time, as the myth goes, was going to put him to death for taking the wild bananas, because the autocratic leader said, we have first choice on the best food, and what's left can go to the peasants. And so, to prevent her partner being killed, Haumea summoned her community and summoned her spiritual help, and in some way overcame the autocratic leader. She used spirituality, she used community to overcome the autocratic leader. So this is feeding into our Aquarian myth of moving into collaboration and community in a bigger way. Now, for some years, this is exact now, and for the next few years, she is square to Pluto. And she's also in a 150-degree aspect, a quincunx to Sedna. So all of those archetypes are not just about transformation, they're about metamorphosis for humanity. And the way we are going to go through this metamorphosis, I think is, and all of the physical things I was just talking about with the solar flares and the photonic light, etc., is to come into community, to reconnect. And I think one of the things that the recent pandemic did with all the lockdowns is make us just yearn for human connection. And we are now rediscovering that in a much bigger way than we ever would without that pandemic. We would have just kept going, same old, same job, same comfort pattern. But that shook us up to say, no, I really want to connect with other people, particularly like-minded people. And that's happening in groups all over the world. I'm in a very big group locally, which is just wonderful. And all of like minds, and that's incredibly supportive. I'd recommend people do that if they can find them.
Yeah, I totally agree with you because I think that for me, the pandemic slowed everyone down to the point
Yeah.
where they were able to go inside. And I think we were so external focused for such a long time, busy for the sake of busyness, that we forgot truly who we were and what we wanted out of life. So I think there was some great, and look, I've lost lots of people, but I've gained amazing people. So there's been some great communities joy, that have been formed because of it. And I love that. I love that. You actually just remind me when you were talking about one of the dwarf archetypes, Hawaii, what's the
Yeah,
name of it?
Homea,
Havea,
Homea.
Havea. It made me think of, I did spend a lot of time in Hawaii. I was studying Huna, and so basically we would go to the volcano and gift Pele, which was the volcano goddess. Yeah. And so when you were talking about that, because I remember we did this ceremony and I was meditating and the water came, it's like the island is alive, the big island,
Yeah,
but it
yeah,
came towards me. And because of my experience, I thought, this is such a beautiful experience. I never want to forget this. So I grabbed a little rock and I thought, I'll take this as something to take home back to Australia. The next day in class, the Kumu said, he warned that people that take things from the island have bad luck. You should have seen me, Pam. Within that instant, I was under a tree, giving the rock back to the island and asking for forgiveness. Yeah, so they're very. So when you were talking about the taking the bananas and things like that, just made me think that it's very sacred, the islands.
very, very. And it's very linked to, I think, ancient Lemuria. That's said to be the
Yes.
base for ancient Lemuria. There's a chap, a friend of mine, Heather Ensworth, has interviewed, who's still carrying on that lineage living in Hawaii. And so I also think the frequency of ancient Lemuria is starting to come back now. And that, as we understand it, was the most perfect civilization we've ever had on Earth that we know about. And I think that frequency is very much coming back. And maybe even some of the land, because Lemuria, Greg Braden talks about this a lot.
Yes.
Lemuria was actually a huge continent. If you look at the ancient maps of from Asia and Tibet, they show it as a very large continent that sunk under the sea. So I have a strong sense that's coming back at least into our frequency.
Yeah. It sounds like we're going through like a transformation, that our body is transforming, that it feels like in a few years time. Richard Rudd talks about it. I had him on the show and he was talking about how, and he was talking the beautiful story about the transformation of a dragonfly, how it ends up, in the water when it comes out crystallized and it ends up flying. So the actual transformation is what we're going through in some way, shape, or form. um, which is really, it makes me wonder what we're going to look like in the next 10, 20 years.
We will look physically lighter, I think. I mean, I don't know if you've heard me talk about it. This is, gosh, I think it's about a year ago now. It was at the end of the night, and I just had this incredibly vivid dream. It lasted maybe 30 seconds before the alarm went off, which was so annoying. But all it was, in the dream, I was in an empty room, nothing in it, but it was filled with pink and peach kind of sparkly light, and there was a mirror on the wall, and I walked up to the mirror and I was just pure light. My eyes were absolutely extraordinary. I was just pure light. And then I just started to lift off. I just started to levitate. And then the alarm went off. So I saw myself as the light body. And I really, and I'll never forget, it was so pin sharp. It was kind of third eye. sight because my own eyesight isn't that sure. So, and that was a promise for humanity, not just for me, but for all humanity. So I think as we move forwards, I mean, the Lemurians were said to live largely in their light body and be attached by a silver cord to the earth. And they ate very little, very lightly, obviously no animals. They couldn't hurt another living being. And so that is the direction that I believe we're moving into. And yes, it's hard for us to understand sometimes because if you do think of the caterpillar, and if you said to the caterpillar, do you know, one day you're going to be able to fly wherever you like and visit plants and trees and blossoms, and you say, you kidding? You know, I can't move an inch in a day. Are you kidding me? So it's hard for us to kind of make that jump in our minds, but internally, that is the process I believe we're going through. There literally physical changes to our DNA, to all of our cells, and we are evolving, metamorphosizing, if that's a word, into I want to call it a galactic human. A galactic human. We are going to rediscover our galactic heritage because we've always thought of ourselves as just human beings with little green men being scary things. Well, that's just not true. We're made of stardust. We know that, you know, the iron in our blood, you know, the calcium in our bones, that's come from the stars. We are made of stardust. And so we are very much going to reconnect, I think, with our galactic family. I mean, look at all the people who are channeling Palladians and Arcturians and, you know, all of those galactic beings. It's coming closer and closer. And I run this very simple meditation on a Sunday evening at 7 o'clock. I know it's a terrible time for Australia, but it kind of works for the rest of the world. And there's so much telepathy going on because more and more people are experiencing benevolent, very tall, benevolent galactic beings coming in to support us when we have those meditations, which is just beautiful, isn't it? Just beautiful. So I think they're so close for us now to help us back into where we've been disconnected with regards to the galaxy.
I have seen such an increase. It's incredible. And I mean, some of them are so profound. And but it's almost like when you listen to them, it's there's almost like a remembrance that takes place.
Yeah.
It's like a connection. And you don't even know why or how, but there is something there that makes you intrigued with what is it that I'm actually experiencing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What?
absolutely. So I think our dreams are going to get more vivid. We're going to become more psychically sensitive, more telepathic, stronger healing ability. We are going to remember these gifts that we've had in the past. It isn't that we've never had them. We are remembering them. You know, the veils are dropping away, if you like, and our psychic senses are becoming much, much sharper. And it's happening quickly. And I think even through April, actually, I mean, April is such a big month. I think even through April, we are going to see some very rapid changes. But certainly these next few years are condensed, accelerated evolution for us. Absolutely.
So I'm curious, Pam. Tell me about April. Everyone talks about April, the big, it's kind of be like the quantum jump for us. What is going on?
Right. If we had to sort of boil it down, there are two very big astrological aspects. The first is the total solar eclipse, which everyone is talking about next Monday. And it's big because it's total. It's big because it is yet again falling across America. We had in August 2017, we had a total solar eclipse falling northwest southeast. We had another solar eclipse October last year falling northwest southeast. This upcoming one on Monday is falling northeast southwest, with the crossing point being Texas. Over the last year or so, I've been saying, watch Texas. Something is going to develop in Texas. And of course, you know, now they have said that they're not going to obey federal law. They're only going to follow the Constitution, sort of border issues of various kinds there. But it's more than that. There's a bigger astrological reason why the US is kind of in the crosswires, in the focus, because it's also still going through its Pluto return, which means that Pluto in its orbit for the very first time since 1776 is coming back to the birthplace of the US, 4th of July, 1776. So it's for the very first time saying, okay, America, who are you? This is who you were when you birthed in 1776. Who are you now? Geographically, which states make up America? Politically, constitutionally, economically, what's your value system? All of those things are clear in the astrology. So this total solar eclipse is going to throw all of that Pluto return into high relief, if you like. So I think a lot is going to happen in America in many, many ways. It's going to go through a huge transformation. And this is the kind of ignition point for that. So the energy, but of course this is global as well, but the focal point I think will be America, and whatever happens in America will ripple out to the rest of the world anyway. But the energies of the total solar eclipse are never just for one day. They last for, the consequences of it last for about 6 months. Then blending with that, we have something called the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which happens on the 20th. And again, not just for one day. This is the ignition point for everything that follows. And this happens every sort of 13 to 14 years, but in Taurus, it hasn't happened since 1941. But it is generally a very exciting and auspicious aspect. There's a feeling of, wow, freedom, liberation, awakening, expanded awareness, expanded consciousness, jumps, quantum jumps in our consciousness, quantum jumps in our understanding, a lot of truth coming to light. It will expand revolution across the world. It will shift the power more to the people, which is part of Pluto's move into Aquarius anyway. It will accelerate that whole theme of there's a shift of power back to the people. Won't happen in a day, a week, a month. It's the real ignition point for that. It could increase seismic activity because Gaia herself is going through her own evolution. And many discoveries have been made exactly when there was a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Discoveries about the cosmos, Galileo's sort of development of the telescope, landing of the first man on the moon, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, first glider flight, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, first engine-powered flight across the Atlantic, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. People who are visionaries and have invented amazing new technology for the world have Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Steve Jobs had a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction natally. Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the World Wide Web, had a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. So it's kind of the visionary awakened mind, if you like. So this, it can be disruptive because it's a jump in energy. It can be disruptive, but overall it's incredibly powerful to wake people up, to help them see from a higher perspective, with greater clarity, greater truth, with an excitement and an expanded awareness of, with a greater understanding of how our cosmos and how our reality operates. So it's a biggie. And because these two are blending together, there's some very rapid changes in the energy, which I think we're going to see in April, which will then set off a whole series of other events for the rest of the year. So I never know the actual event. I never know the event because 50% of it is what humanity does with their energy, as we've just been saying. So I never know the actual event, but I think it's going to be fast, dynamic, eventful, and exciting.
So, in other words, hang on to our pants or our hats and get ready for the
Welcome it
ride.
in. Yeah, welcome it in.
Wow, amazing. So, I'd like to understand when you talk about astrology, you talk about it being uh, a sacred. I think it was like a sacred, the way that you described it with the music and the sacred language. I love the way that you describe it, and I can't speak like you, of course, but I love the way that it's like how we play with it and knowing what's coming, knowing with all these big shifts when we're talking about these big celestial alignments. I don't know, I'm sure there's a lot more to come because people talk about also 2026 is a big time as well. 2025. It looks like we're going in for a big ride for the next couple of years anyway. Um, I'd love to understand because and like you said, you just don't know how it plays out, and depending on your chart, of course, because we're all unique in that way. But how do we play with first of all, how did you describe it from a music when you're talking about it's a sacred language, astrology, and that it's really it's like the music, and it's almost like how we're the musicians, how we play these notes.
100%. I mean, it's quite a useful analogy because every person's birth chart is completely unique. It will never be repeated in history again. I mean, and isn't that remarkable? So that says all of us are special. But we then have latitude, we have free will in how we play that piece of music. You know, we can just bang a tin spoon on an old box, or we can be part of the London Philharmonic. We can have a small life, or we can have a big life. And, you know, we all kind of sense that. Dare I do that? Dare I step out? And some of us do, and some of us don't. So our latitude comes in how we play that unique sheet of music. And so that's why I think actually we have a considerable amount of free will. Having studied tens of thousands of charts, I've seen how people have fully stepped into their birth chart and had a magnificent life in terms of helping many other people. Whereas others, perhaps who are more fearful, have kind of still held the trapdoor down and, you know, stayed small and stayed tight. And that's not my judgment. That's entirely up to how they run their life, you know. And, as you say, no judgment, because that doesn't take us to a good place. But it really is sacred. I mean, it was one of the key pillars of teaching, one of the most fundamental ones in the mystery schools. You know, all those thousands of years ago. So it has always been regarded as sacred. And I think astrology is actually way older than we even know. I mean, in the recorded history, it is said that astrology began in ancient Mesopotamia about 6,000 years ago in what is now sadly Iraq, modern day Iraq. But that was supposedly the dawn of civilization with arithmetic and writing, and you know, that was the birth of it all. And that's when, because people didn't have computers or televisions or cinemas, they just used to watch the planets move around and tell each other stories about the gods who lived on the planets. And those are still the myths that I literally use today in my practice. You know, it's incredible. And it came from about 6,000 years ago. However, with the recent discoveries, and I'm sure you're aware of this, Catherine, with Robert Edward Grant in the pyramids, and the pyramids could be 13,000 years old or older, and all of the astrological signs have been discovered Christmas time inside the king's chamber. That must mean that whoever built the king's chamber had brought the knowledge of the stars, the constellations with them. And the estimate is, and this reinforces Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval's work as well, that the pyramids are 13,000 years older, or maybe even an entire precessional cycle older than that. So that throws the 6,000 years up in the air, because it's actually a galactic language, isn't it? It's a language of the constellations, language of the planets. So I think it's that kind of thing that we are on the brink of discovering right now. But it's sacred because really you're looking at a person's internal architecture when you're looking at their birth chart. And so often I think when I was doing client work, I would simply ask a question or plant a seed, and they'd just sit and hold sacred space for that to drop, which is so much better than me telling them or explaining to them. Do you know what I mean? They have to get to that place themselves. So it's the holding of sacred space, and the birth chart gives me the questions to ask. It gives me the architecture of that person's psyche or soul to ask the correct questions to help jump that into consciousness. And Carl Jung, as you probably know, was a prolific astrologer. He was kept very quiet about it, but he used to use it for all of his clients because it gave him a shortcut to whatever psychosis they were going through, because he could see it on a piece of paper. So it's sacred in that way. You're dealing with something which is really profound and ancient, and probably just a continuation of many lives. Well, certainly a continuation of many lives for that person. You know, what is the golden thread that they are still continuing, and they still have, as we all have, lessons to learn in this life, and the questions you ask, the seeds you plant, could help them get to those answers faster. I just think it's the most beautiful modality in so many ways.
I'm shaking my head because I totally agree with you, Pam, because I believe that, and I was saying this just the other day, that when somebody picks up your chart and reads your chart, it depends on their lens, it depends on their perception, it depends on their belief system, it depends on how they read charts. So I think that the way that you do it by asking question, you're actually tapping into their own psyche, allowing them to bring that archetype to life, or whatever that may, whether they want to work on career, relationship, love, health, whatever that may be. But you can see it on the chart, and therefore you can ask the right question, the right thought-provoking questions for them to bring the story to life, because it's so much more powerful when the individual can bring it to life rather than somebody that you don't know very well that's got the chart in front of you telling you what's going to happen to you and what has happened to you.
Yeah, that doesn't help the integration process for that person to move forwards. And, you know, Carl Jung's work was all about whatever was stuck in the unconscious that was causing that person the problem, bringing it to the conscious. And once it's in the conscious mind, you can see it, release it, change it, etc. So, and astrology is immensely powerful at doing that. It's a wonderful tool.
I love it. I love it. I always say if you can name it, you can tame it, because anything that's sitting at the, whether it's unconscious or subconscious, the moment you can bring it to the consciousness, that's when the real work starts happening, when you can actually start, working with whatever is coming up. So I love that. Absolutely love that. There's just one thing. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about that maybe we should all know that what we should be getting prepared for or getting ready for? Because I know I have an hour with you and our time is wrapping up. But is there anything that you would like to tell us, or give us advice around anything that's coming up that we should be prepared for?
I think we will go through a lot of change in different ways, in different geographies, and but feel excited for the journey. Feel excited for the journey. You're a surfer and you're about to surf the biggest wave you've ever surfed, and feel excited about that because we're here right now. You know, we're in it. So feel excited that you chose to be here at this time, and something I often say, and I said it in a post yesterday actually, just imagine that you're standing at the end of 2024 and you want to be proud of how you played this year. You might be slightly dusty and battered, but you want to stand proud and say, I could not have done more to ride that wave. And it was a bit wild sometimes, and it kind of kept kicking me off the surfboard, but I rode that wave and it took me higher up the beach than I've ever been before. Have that vision of you at the end of 2024. So that's what I'd say. And really, know that things will be turbulent. Keep your frequency high. Welcome in all of the ingredients, even though physically they're uncomfortable. Welcome them in, I would say, because they are fast tracking us. We have never. I was talking to Dr. Jude Currivan last month. In fact, the videos have just come out today, I think, or yesterday. And she, as a cosmologist, brilliant cosmologist, was saying that this is a completely unique experience for humanity. We have never gone through such a jump in our evolution as we are in right now. We are in it. We're in the crucible of change right now. So it's very exciting, and our souls chose to be here. We might want to check the small print a little more closely next time, but we chose to be here, so we're in it. And
That's
you do not want to be disappointed with yourself at the end of the year and say, "Ah, shucks, I went into fear," and you want to be proud of yourself.
Yeah, I believe that, Pam. I believe that we chose to be here at this time and an exciting time. We are all experiencing this because we wanted to experience this. I don't know, but sometimes I get a vision me looking down and went, oh, as a soul, that looks like an interesting life. I might pick this one and experience it. And if I have a look at it, we've all had our own significant emotional events that have taken place in life. But for me, as hard as they were the most growth. that I experience. And so that's the way I see anything that's turbulent. I think by the end of it, we're going to come out bigger and stronger and lighter. I think we're going to do a lot of letting go. That's what I'm seeing. A lot of letting go needs to be done. Not so much attaining or acquiring or setting goals, but what is it that I need to let go of? And that comes back to that whole baggage stuff I was thinking about, is what is it that I need to release and let go of? And I do that as often as possible because we believe, well, I'm really getting into the whole ancestral stuff. And so for me, we might have carried things for many, many, many lifetimes. And
Yeah.
so sometimes we have these occurring patterns that take over, and it's up to us to go, well, it might not be something from this time. It might be from another time, another place. And it could even be karmic. Who knows? But I think all of that's another thing. A lot of karmic clearing is taking place. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, huge, absolutely huge. So much has been cleared, purged, especially I think this month. It's very, very strong. Purging, clearing, everything is becoming lighter. And so but we had more time before, as it were. This time it's quick. There's an acceleration happening. And so, yeah, I think one of the golden nuggets I'm going to mention at the end is try and see everything as operating for you rather than at you. Because in difficult times, they, oh, God, this is just overwhelming and everything's coming at me and I'm struggling. And if we can see everything that happens in life, and you've just been saying it really, as happening for us, the most difficult times produce the most growth, that's a very good filter, a very good lens through which to see your life. So that's actually going to be one of my golden nuggets.
Well, Pam, this is a perfect segue to go there. So, as you know, we wrap up the show with three shiny golden nuggets. So, what would you like? That was obviously one. What are the
Yeah.
two shiny golden nuggets would you like to leave for our listeners?
I think living from the inside out rather than the outside in, because that brings you into your center, your power. It's much simpler to live from the inside out rather than being buffeted by the nightly news. So live from the inside out rather than the outside in. That really connects you to your inner strength. And lastly, always be kind. Always be kind.
Oh, I love that. I could relate to the second one mostly because I find that sometimes when I'm feeling a bit rattled or off
Yeah.
key, I'm external focused, and then I just hold my heart, just drop into my heart and go inside. And it's just so much more peaceful there. So I do love that one. I love all three.
Yeah, thank you. Bless you. Yeah, and I really understand that. I mean, the volume of my work is, it's just enormous. So it's easy to get scattered into emails and yeah. So I've got to keep on telling myself these things as well. I haven't cracked them all, but I've got to keep remembering all the things that I walk my talk.
Yeah.
Got to keep doing all the things I share with you.
I have a saying, we teach what we must learn.
100%.
Yeah. So, Pam, I want to say thank you so much for your time, your energy, and sharing your wealth of wisdom. You're wonderful. I love your work. I know everyone's going to check you out. For the people that don't know you from our tribe and from Australia, you're wonderful. So keep doing what you're doing.
Bless you, bless you, bless you. Really loved it. And you asked very different questions, Catherine. So thank you so much. And I really enjoyed it. And have a wonderful month. It's not going to be
Yes.
dull. A
No.
wonderful month.
Thank you so much. Lots of love and thank you so very much. Thank you.
Yeah, lots of
Namaste.
love to you too. Bye for now.